What is COP21? Well, COP21 is a United Nations climate change conference aimed at attaining a legally binding agreement on climate change. What is so different about this meeting compared to the several high-profile meetings that have been held before? Well, China and the United States are at the table and are willing to meet an agreement. If an agreement is not reached, then it could be detrimental for the Caribbean region. What is detrimental, however, are calls for small island developing states, SIDS, to source funding for climate change. That's according to lead negotiator for loss and damage for the Caribbean and the SIDS, James Fletcher. Some developed countries believe it should not only be them to contribute to adaptation climate financing, but developing countries should do so as well. This comes amid concerns over creative accounting. Fletcher has strongly rejected those calls, saying it is an indictment on developed countries to ask developing ones to fix a problem they did not create.
To ensure that our schools, our hospitals, our health centers are now climate proof so that the next storm when it comes through or the next heavy rains when they come through will not negatively impact them. You can't be asking us to borrow money to do that. A lot of the indebtedness in many of our Caribbean countries is because we've had to be borrowing money after the passage of every extreme weather event to engage in the repair and recovery process. So it is really adding insult to injury to ask us to borrow money from private finance for the adaptation. So we've always made it clear that adaptation money has to be public finance, it has to be grant funding. And so these are all some of the discussions that are taking place, and that's what makes this whole finance discussion a very lively, a very energetic, and a very involved one.
The statement comes in light of a commitment by developed countries to raise $100 billion per year by 2020 to help developing countries cope with climate change. Despite pessimism by many towards that promise, World Bank Group Vice President and Special Envoy for Climate Change, Rachel Kite, believes contributing countries are well on their way.
At the World Bank Group, we believe that there is a politically credible pathway to $100 billion. The OECD report, which was released in October, which was an aggregate report of all of the climate finance flows that would count under the convention, indicated that there was $62 billion flowing in 2014, and so by 2020 we would expect that would increase. At the annual meetings of the World Bank and the IMF, also in October, all of the regional development banks and the World Bank Group pledged to increase our climate financing. In the case of the World Bank Group, that we would increase by a third to 28% of our pipeline and $29 billion every year.
Negotiators from nearly 200 countries are gathered in Paris to reach an agreement to cut emissions of greenhouse gases that scientists say are on track to warm the planet to risky levels. Reporting in Paris, France, I am Sarah Peter.